This is my 2015 Softail Slim, and I'm going to be taking off the stock exhausts and replacing them with some Vance Hines Big Shots. So I'm going to do this little video to hopefully help out anybody else who needs to know how to do it. First thing I'm going to do is remove the seat. I've got a sprung solo seat on mine, which is a bit more involved than the stock one. But that needs to come off so that we can disconnect the O2 sensors. And then I'm going to be taking off the slip-on mufflers, silencers, loosening the heat shields, taking off the footboards and controls, or loosening them so that I can then disconnect the header pipes and take them off. So here goes. Okay, now that the seat's off, the first thing we're going to do, we've disconnected the battery. If you don't know how to do that, if you've got an alarm, you put your bike into ignition, making sure you've got your key fob so that the bike alarm doesn't go off. And while the bike is turned on, you disconnect the negative cable from the battery. Okay, we're going to disconnect the rear O2 sensor, which is this big clip here. And it's the only one there, so it's easy enough to do. So you just press on that and it should just pop out like that. Okay, easy. And next we're going to undo these two bolts here, which will let the whole rectifier assembly fold forward, and we get to where the O2 sensor is plugged in behind here. So the rectifier cover will flop forward, and you can see the grey, that one there, the O2 sensor there, so that just needs to be disconnected, which I can't do with one hand. There you go, so that was connected around in here to that bit there. You can see now it's disconnected. It's actually, boop, it's this wire here, which is the O2 sensor screwed into the back of the pipe. So you don't have to get round there to try and unscrew it. You can now take off the header pipe and leave that attached without having to somehow get your spanners in there, which might make a mess. Okay, so we've disconnected the negative. I'm going to disconnect the positive, and then we can slide the battery all the way out, which means that the O2 sensor we can then pull through, or rather it can go pulled through that way when we take the exhaust off. So I'm just going to disconnect that one. There we go. Actually, put these back in so we don't lose them. But that's all disconnected now, and so the battery can come straight out. Got a bit of a pull, and there we go. And now the O2 sensor here, it's a bit dark, you can't really see, but the O2 sensor wire goes down through the bottom of the battery pan and it comes out under here where it connects. So when I take this off, it can now pull through without me having to fiddle around undoing this with spanners and, well, potentially scratching stuff and making a mess. And just to show that I've pulled this out through from underneath, through the battery pan, out the back here. That's now loose and attached still to the exhaust. And same with the front one, we've disconnected it from inside here, wiggled it through, and again, that's now loose, but still attached to the exhaust, so that we can take the whole exhaust pipe and that one off without having to unscrew, getting our spanners all around the nice shiny stuff here and making a mess or a scratch. Okay, so we've disconnected the O2 sensors, and well, the battery's out, disconnected the O2 sensors. Now we can start thinking about removing the exhaust system. In order to do that, we'll be removing the footboards, just so that the pipe doesn't have to get around any awkward bends, and I don't scratch anything. But before we even take the pipes off, we need to remove the silencers, which are just a case of undoing a bolt and a couple of bolts where they attach to a bracket down here, depending on what silencers you've got. But that's usually just a case of undoing a few bolts, and they can come off with a bit of a wiggle. I'll also remove my passenger foot peg here, and then we can start looking at removing the main headers. Okay, so we're just removing the silencers here. The silencers are actually held on to the main pipe with a Jubilee clip and a bolt, and they're held onto a bracket here with 2 bolts. I've actually removed one, but I'm just going to get in there, and your spanner won't get around that one, so just very carefully making sure we're not scratching or damaging anything. Just very carefully loosening that, and actually pretty soon you'll find that it's actually loose enough to get with your fingers. So there we go. And if you hold the pipe itself, then you'll be able to get at that and loosen it with your fingers until eventually you'll find that it will come out. In fact, you'll have to move the camera because you're in the way. There we go. So that's loose. Right, that bolt is now completely loose, but I've got to undo the bolt at the front so that I can actually just wiggle this and pull it off. So there we go. So you can see this last bolt is just holding on there. If I give this a wiggle, you can see it's actually loose. But it is attached to this bracket, which is coming off later, so that bolt will stay in there until I basically loosen the whole thing. I've loosened the exhaust at the front here, so with a little gentle, very gentle wiggle, that pipe comes straight off. Okay, and you can see that's where it was bolted through, so that's what was rattling about. But essentially this whole bracket's going to come off soon as well. So we need to take the second silencer off, then we can attack this bracket here. Okay, next I'm going to take off the footboard, and you can see that that's attached by a bolt and a nut here, and a bolt and a nut here. So they just need to unscrew those, and that can come off, which will give us a bit more clearance to take the headers off. Okay, next up, well, certainly on my model, there's a bracket here with a big bolt. There's a nut on the back side of that which needs to be undone. Okay, next up we're going to just loosen the heat shields here. I don't know if you can see, but it's a bit tight to get in there to get to those flange bolts. So we need to loosen the heat shields a little. There's clamps in various places, hopefully so we can move the heat shield a bit, enough to get to those flange bolts. We might possibly take them off altogether, but I'll see how I go. As you can see, yeah, the front one, it's a little bit tight to get in there without scratching up the heat shields, which I don't want to do. Okay, so you can see that we've removed the header pipes now. I actually just put a towel to cover all the forward controls so that nothing got scratched as it came off. What you will find on the English models, or the European models certainly, is a big bracket that sits on there. Well, actually mine, this bracket was for my no, that's stock, I think, yeah. So I had Vance Hines slip-ons when I bought the bike, so I'm assuming this is a stock bracket which fits on there. But what you can see there is the active exhaust valve motor. Now that needs to come off because there's no need for it in the new Vance Hines pipes, and the bracket that it'll eventually attach to will sit on there, and there's no attachment to house that unit anyway, but you don't need it. What we will need to buy is the sort of the caps that will go on the wiring, the eliminator set. I think it's about 30 quid. So we will need to buy that before I can get going. But the other thing that you'll see is down here there's a bracket which is held by 2 bolts. If you undo those 2 bolts, you can take this lump of metal off because again it's of no use. Okay, so next we've taken the pipes out of the box, and you can see that the heat shields are still sort of wrapped around them with protective packing. But what we need to do in order to loosen them, well, in order to get to them and then put the clips on, we need to take the end caps off. So they've got to come off next. Okay, so I've already installed the hose clamps on one of the heat shields, but I'll show you how to do it on the second one because it's a bit of a faff. But basically, you take the heat shield off, and you'll see that it's still in its packaging. And what you need to do is just mark where these hose clamps are going to go. And there's 4 of them on this one. 2, 3, 4. So what you do is I'm just using a black permanent marker, but just a little line or a mark or whatever, just to show you where you're installing those hose clamps, because you won't be able to see these once you've got this on the exhaust. So I'm just going to mark up this whole pipe. Be good if you guys see what I was doing. So marking up that pipe, so you can see there's just a little black mark there now on the outer edge, or maybe you can't see it but I can. There you go, you can see there's a black mark there. Just to help you work out where these hose clamps will go in. Yeah, I'll mark up the others and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so you can see that I've put this heat shield back on and reinstated the end cap and done it all up. And then what we're going to do is take, let me just put the camera down here somehow. Okay, put that down. Excuse me a minute. Right, so what we've got here is a exhaust clamp, well, hose clip, that you can see the black marks here. They need to slide under the pipe to secure the heat shield. Now, you want to make sure that the screw bolt head is accessible from the outside. So we're going to slide down that side and up and under and through here. So we just look for where the mark is and push that down and give it a wiggle, and you should feel it slide through. And there it is. And then we just reattach and screw it in. Not tight, just keep it loose because we're going to do some adjustment later on. Okay, so that's that one there. Then there's another one to be done here, and there's one here, and there'll be one further up here. Okay, and then it'll basically look like this pipe here where you've got all your hose clamps on. Next, you'll see that I've taken the O2 sensors from the old headers and installed them onto these headers. Make sure that the shorter one with the grey goes on the front and the longer one with black goes on the back. A little bit of copper slip, anti-seize compound, just to make sure you can get them out again should you need to. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the circlips and the flanges from the old headers, and we're going to install them on the new ones. I'm probably going to put a little bit of tape around the top of the exhaust here just to stop them sliding and clanging on the heat shields or scratching up the pipes. Okay, we've got the exhaust flanges and circlips installed, making sure that the DVD bit faces down, otherwise you'll get it up to the system and realise you need to flip them around. So they're both installed. And we've also installed the bracket across the back 2 pipes here. Okay, so now we're ready to try and fit it up to the bike. Okay, so we've got the exhauster fitted. and what's left to do is kind of tidy up really. So the exhaust flange nuts holding the headers on being tightened up, about 13 Newton meters. Then the bracket bolts underneath here need to be tightened. Then the heat shields, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 and 4, they need to be tightened so they don't rattle about. And then we can look to feed back through the O2 sensor cables. The one here's got to go underneath and up through underneath the seat. And I think we're nearly there.